Welcome to this episode of American Music, where we live our stories through the shared experiences of musical artists, scholars, and storytellers. This episode looks at the role of spirituals in blackface minstrelsy through the story of Sam Lucas, one of the late 19th century's most important performers that you've probably never heard of. He started performing just after the Civil War and ended his career at the onset of the First World War. One of the most versatile entertainers of his generation, his career spanned the genres of blackface minstrelsy, musical theater, vaudeville and variety, and silent film. I'm your host, Sandra Graham, and joining me as the voice of Sam Lucas is Marques Carter. Most of us know an African-American spiritual: Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Deep River, My Lord, What a Morning. Spirituals are the sacred folk songs that grew out of slavery. They were composed and improvised by people who are now lost to history and who passed them on orally from singer to singer. After the Civil War, a group of students known as the Fisk Jubilee Singers popularized spirituals on the concert stage to earn money for their school in Nashville. In fact, you're listening to a quartet of Fisk students singing in the background now from a 1909 recording. With the Fisk Jubilee Singers, spirituals became known as Jubilee songs and were arranged, written down, and standardized in published music. Dozens of other troops followed their example, igniting a Jubilee mania, which had an almost immediate influence on minstrel music. Blackface minstrel shows had been around since the 1840s. White men applied burnt cork to their faces and enacted caricatures of Southern slaves in song, dance, and comedy, using instruments like the banjo, fiddle, tambourine, and bones or castanets. Although a few black performers worked as minstrels, it wasn't until after the Civil War that they joined the profession in large numbers. White Northern audiences embraced them, believing that their stage representations of plantation frolics, cotton fields, and praise meetings enlivened by music and dance depicted slave life as it really had been. The minstrel show was the most popular form of American entertainment in the 19th century. It had a little bit of everything: skits, singing, dancing, instrumental virtuosos, animal acts, and lots of lowbrow comedy. In its fast pace and reliance on topical humor, it was like the Saturday Night Live of the 19th century. Presidents, actors and actresses, Shakespeare, opera, nothing was sacred when it came to the minstrel show parody, and that included religion. White performers in blackface had been lampooning praise meetings and the sermons of backwoods preachers long before the Fisk Jubilee Singers caught the public's attention in 1872. So it was no surprise when a group of minstrel performers started burlesquing the performances of spirituals by groups like the Fisk students. They called themselves the Hamtown Students. Although white minstrels were the first to parody spirituals, black minstrel performers weren't far behind. In this episode, we're going to look at the role of spirituals in the career of one of the most important black entertainers of the late 19th century, Sam Lucas. As Lucas once observed,
"The minstrel was the first door of entrance open to Negroes on the American stage."
And Lucas himself stepped over that threshold in 1871. He became a minstrel star by writing and performing songs that were rooted in spirituals, and later he broke free of the minstrel show's constraints in part by forgoing spirituals and composing songs in the style of white parlor music. Lucas was born into slavery on August 7, 1842. His parents belonged to Samuel Cockrell of Romney, Hampshire County, Virginia, which is now part of West Virginia, and Lucas took the first name of his master. Cockrell's will stipulated that his 45 slaves be emancipated upon his death and receive $500 to help them leave Virginia so they wouldn't be re-enslaved. Cockrell died around the time that Lucas was born, so Lucas's family moved to a small house in Washington Courthouse, Ohio, the county seat of Fayette County, about 70 miles northeast of Cincinnati. Lucas retained a rich Virginia accent throughout his life, which often struck others as peculiar since they assumed he was a native Ohioan. He explained his Southern drawl this way.
300 or 400 colored people had been emancipated and had come up to Ohio before I was born. I grew up among them, so I suppose I couldn't help talking the way they did.
In fact, even the majority of the town's original white residents had come from Southern states. Washington Courthouse didn't have any formal schools at the time, so Lucas never had any schooling. Instead, he used to go across the fields at night to a woman who taught him to read and write. His mother, who loved to sing, always had a spiritual on her lips, and Lucas probably also heard plenty of spirituals in the surrounding community of former slaves. It's no surprise, then, that spirituals inspired his earliest song compositions. As a young man, Lucas worked odd jobs and took part in amateur minstrel entertainments, learning guitar and honing his singing and comedy skills. He served a short stint in the 5th U.S. Colored Infantry and also trained as a barber. While he was working in a barber shop in St. Louis around 1870, a reporter noted, "It was harder for him than for anybody else to shave customers because his clientele was in a chronic state of broad grin." Lucas was a natural mime, and his excellent memory, sense of humor, and buoyant personality made him a captivating storyteller. Not only did barbering sustain him in the lean times of his early entertainment career, but it gave Lucas a sense of style. In those days, in the words of black minstrel Tom Fletcher, colored barbers were the only colored men who were well-dressed. They were usually called dudes. Sam kept that well-dressed tradition all of his life. So when Lucas's patrons in his St. Louis barbershop prodded, "Why don't you go be a minstrel yourself?" Well, that's exactly what he did. Lucas spent the next couple of years working with black-managed troupes, but he set his eyes on a troupe that was earning a reputation as the best in the nation, Charles Callender's Georgia Minstrels. He sent Callender a letter of application, and the white manager hired him in 1873 at a salary of $4 per week. Callender's company of 24 black performers included the standard minstrel show roles, an interlocutor, or MC, and 2 endmen, who specialized in buffoonery and sat on either end of the line of performers. The endmen were named after the instruments they played, Mr. Bones and Mr. Tambo. The rest of the troupe comprised singers, dancers, sketch artists, instrumentalists, and specialty performers. Lucas's first assignment was to sing in the troupe's quartet and just fill in wherever he was needed. But before long, Callender promoted Lucas to endman, more than doubling his salary to $10 per week. Lucas's rising popularity was rewarded yet again with a raise to $20 in 1874. So in 1 year, Lucas went from the bottom of the bill to the top. He wore his success with pride, purchasing a gold-headed cane in 1873, and in later years adding gold medals, rings, and other flashy adornments. Lucas started composing songs, which he brought to manager Callender. Most minstrels couldn't read or notate music, so when they composed a song, they'd simply sing it to the troupe's band and let the instrumentalists make their own arrangement. But the ever-entrepreneurial Lucas hired a professional arranger to write out the instrumental parts for his songs, which enhanced his reputation. One of Lucas's earliest hits was "Carved That Possum." Even though he was credited as composer on the cover of the sheet music, Lucas didn't actually write it, but he did make it famous through his performances. The song was actually composed by black minstrel Henry Hart, who taught it to Lucas when the two performed together in 1874 while Lucas was on hiatus from the Georgia Minstrels. Published in 1875, Carved That Possum is a good example of how minstrel songs by black composers relied on the folk spirituals they grew up singing. The melody comes from one of the most beloved of all spirituals, Go Down Moses. Here's Marques singing a bit of Go Down Moses as transmitted by the Fisk Jubilee Singers.
When Israel was in Egypt land, Let my people go, oppressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go.
In this spiritual, the phrase, "let my people go," is called an internal refrain because it returns again and again between phrases of the verse. Now Marques will sing the beginning of Carve That Possum.
The possum meat him good to eat, carve him to the heart. You'll always find him good and sweet, carve him to the heart.
You can hear how the tune to the internal refrain, "Carve him to the heart," is exactly the same as "Let my people go" in Go Down Moses. But the minstrel song uses dialect, and its words reinforce the derogatory stereotype that African Americans love to eat possum. Carve That Possum is an early example of a commercial spiritual, a song written by and credited to a composer, with tune or lyrics based on a folk spiritual, usually passed on through print publications instead of orally, and most important, created for entertainment and financial profit by both white and black composers. Was the transformation of a sacred spiritual into a commercial secular song sacrilegious, as some have argued? Maybe this is the wrong question to ask in the case of black entertainers. Henry Hart, Sam Lucas, and many other black minstrels composed songs based on folk spirituals because it was the music they had grown up with. Their commercial spirituals were the first step toward a popular song style that grew out of black cultural experience. And as we'll see, these songs gave their creators a leg up in the entertainment industry. Lucas made the following observation in 1876.
I had built myself up to the point where I was one of the best all-around entertainers in the business, and I could pick out my own shows.
Dissatisfied with the constraints of minstrel performance and longing to be accepted as an entertainer on the legitimate stage, Lucas left Callender's Georgia Minstrels and joined the Higher Sisters Dramatic Company. Since 1867, the formerly trained vocalists Anna Mata and Emma Louise Hires had been earning favorable reviews for their concerts of European operatic and art song repertory, supplemented with popular ballads. But once the Fisk Jubilee singers made spirituals famous, the Hire sisters were forced to sing them as well, or risk losing their white audiences. In 1876, the sisters decided to go in a new direction. They formed a musical theater company, becoming pioneers in staging productions by and about African Americans, and at the center was Sam Lucas. Their first production was Out of the Wilderness, written by white playwright Joseph Bradford, and known later as Out of Bondage. Premiering in 1876, it was a mashup of minstrel-style comedy, improvisation, spirituals, parlor songs from the white tradition, and dance, all of them floating freely within a loose narrative. Over the course of 4 acts, the play chronicles the emancipation of a group of slaves by Union soldiers and their trip north, where they become educated. Their journey is represented musically by casting off the spirituals of slavery and embracing European musical ideals, a journey that Lucas replicated in his own musical career. Although Lucas wrote his share of derogatory minstrel songs, like Carve That Possum, most of his commercial spirituals could almost be mistaken for actual spirituals. For example, his song Talk About Your Moses mimics the expressive sound of the Fisk Jubilee singers, with its 4-part harmony, use of loud and soft dynamics, humming, and dramatic pauses, as this recording demonstrates.
Glory, hallelujah. Sing glory in my soul.
Lucas's commercial spiritual, The Old Ship of Zion, talks about crossing over into heaven, which is a common theme for spirituals. Even though it's meant for entertainment, minstrel stereotypes are absent in the lyrics. Marques will sing a verse and a chorus.
The day did break and the sun did rise. I was gonna live with the Lamb, And I seen them angels up in the skies, I's gonna live with the Lamb. Oh, the old ship of Zion is gonna sail, I's gonna live with the Lamb. And she's only waiting for the gospel gale, I's gonna live with the Lamb. Yes, I done quit all my worldly ways, done quit all my worldly ways, done quit all my worldly ways, I's gonna live with the Lamb.
The lyrics of Lucas's commercial spiritual, The Gospel Cars, are related to the spiritual gospel train, which you might also know as Get on Board, Little Children. Marques will again sing a verse and a chorus. It's worth bearing in mind that originally Lucas's songs would have been accompanied by a band, or perhaps a guitar or banjo.
There is a road that Moses made, the angels bids you come. From earth to heaven this line extends, the angels bids you come. No fare for you am there to pay, the angels bids you come. For Moses am himself the way, the angels bids you come. The gospel cars are moving, will you go, children? Will you go, children? The angels bids you come.
Lucas continued to perform with the Higher Sisters off and on throughout his career. In 1879, they reunited for a music drama called Peculiar Sam, or The Underground Railroad, written specifically for him by musician and writer Pauline Hopkins, the first play written by an African American that Lucas appeared in. Renamed The Slave's Escape or some variation on that theme, the plot essentially parallels that of Out of Bondage, except that in Hopkins's play, the characters display more agency. They save themselves by escaping slavery instead of being rescued by Union soldiers. And their characters are more multidimensional. For example, when the protagonists reach Canada in the final act, their Southern cultural roots are not erased, despite their obvious acculturation to the North. Yes, they sing white songs at the end of the play, but they also still get happy with spirituals. The play was ideal for the multi-talented Lucas, who got to disguise himself as a number of different characters, invent lots of comic business, dance, and sing specialty songs. It was ideal for him in another way as well, for the plot echoed Lucas's ambitions to be successful in a white world without losing his cultural identity. Lucas always had a number of side gigs going, and one of them included his own Jubilee Company, which sang his commercial spirituals as well as popular songs of the day in concert. In 1878, he made history as the first African-American actor to portray the title role in a white stage production of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Up to this time, the character of Uncle Tom had been portrayed by a white man in blackface. Lucas's performance caused the novel's author, Harriet Beecher Stowe, to write the management and exclaim that Lucas's rendition was closer to her idea of the character than that of any other actor. Lucas explained why his portrayal was so successful.
The trouble with most white actors is that they play Uncle Tom like they would play Hamlet or King Richard. They make him straighten himself up and look his master in the eye and say at the top of his voice, "You may kill me if you like, but I won't do this thing. No, never!" Why, slaves didn't talk that way to their master, shouting defiance and proclaiming what they wouldn't do, as if they were just saying they were just as good or better than their master.
After his debut as Uncle Tom, Lucas tried to replicate his success in other white dramatic productions, but none of the many plays written for him found popularity, despite widespread praise for his talents. Meanwhile, he started performing only novelty and sentimental numbers in variety shows in an attempt to distance himself from minstrelsy. He became known for these ballads and motto songs. Marques is going to sing two verses from a song about the 1884 presidential election in which Grover Cleveland faced off against James Blaine. The style is very different from Lucas's commercial spirituals. The lyrics aren't race-specific, there's no dialect, and the meter is a compound meter, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like a waltz feel, which you don't find in folk spirituals. Each verse ends with the motto, "That's what the little bird whispered to me."
The country is full of excitement again. Election is coming, that fact's very plain. From now till November, the noise will be great. But don't get excited, be easy and wait. Let every man vote as he thinks he should vote. And don't force your views down another man's throat. To do what he likes, every voter is free. That's what the little bird whispered to me. The torchlight processions are marching again. Some people are shouting for Logan and Blaine, and Cleveland and Hendricks have shouters as well. And who'll be elected, the future will tell. Ben Butler is quiet at present, I hear, but you never can tell when old Ben will appear. Like Jack in the Box, quite uncertain is he. That's what the little bird whispered to me.
Another example of a song in the white popular style is Gentle Mary of the Lee, a sentimental ballad from 1882. It's a love song. Like the song we just heard, there are no references to specifically black racial identity in either the words or the music. Marques will sing the chorus.
Lovely, smiling, modest Mary, dearer than my life is she. Comes she tripping like a fairy, gentle Mary of the Lee.
By the early 1880s, Lucas considered himself retired from minstrelsy. And in fact, when Charles Callender put together what he billed as a colossal colored minstrel festival in the summer of 1883, Lucas was notably absent. Callender said that Lucas's specialty did not answer the minstrel purposes. In other words, his performances had become too white for black minstrelsy. We'll never know for sure what kinds of songs Lucas would have chosen to write if he hadn't had to conform to the formulas of a racist entertainment model. He began with what he knew, the folk music of slavery. And like the characters he portrayed in Out of Bondage and the Underground Railroad, he metaphorically moved north over the course of his career, toward songs written in a cultivated style that allowed him to advance his career without self-inflicted wounds. Lucas's commercial spirituals facilitated this shift. The 21 commercial spirituals that he published around 1880 served as an important pivot in his career. He interpolated them into musicals and into the concert performances by his own Jubilee troupes, along with songs from the white tradition. This is exactly what respected artists like the Fifth Jubilee Singers had done, interspersing white songs with traditional spirituals on their programs. But once Lucas's commercial spirituals had served their purpose, he stopped performing them. Lucas's evolution in musical style, from black folk tradition to white cultivated song, represented a shift in social group affiliation, from lower to higher class, from uneducated to educated, from outsider to insider. It also accompanied his emergence from ensemble member to solo star performer. His life story exemplifies the ingenuity required of black performers to transcend the restrictions imposed on them by the white arbiters of entertainment in the late 1800s. In the 1890s, Lucas was in his 50s, a time of life when many entertainers were ready to retire. Instead, he joined a new generation of Black performers on stage in a series of musical comedies. These young artists, who included Billy Johnson, Bob Cole, J. Rosamond Johnson, and Ernest Hogan, among others, lauded Lucas as the dean of the colored theatrical profession. Privately, they called him Dad. Lucas had to have found deep satisfaction in a Pittsburgh review of his 1907 performance in the musical farce The Shoofly Regiment, which said that Lucas would be funny in any color. Lucas finally retired from the stage in 1912, only to come back once more to play Uncle Tom in the 1914 silent movie Uncle Tom's Cabin, directed by William Robert Daly. By that time, he'd had a successful career in the genres of minstrelsy, variety, vaudeville, Broadway theater, and now film. Few entertainers of the time, regardless of skin color, could make a similar claim. Lucas died in a home maintained by the Colored Vaudeville Benevolent Association, supported in his last years by generous friends and a pension of $19 per month, just $3 more than his monthly starting salary with Callender's Georgia Minstrels back in 1873. But even at his funeral, his voice was heard as the pastor read a message that Lucas had penned the year before he died.
To my friends, brothers, and sisters throughout the entire world, the curtain has gone down on me for the last time. I prepared myself to meet him, the creator of all of us. And if you will prepare yourself to meet him, you will meet me at heaven's gate, because I will be there. Don't think for a moment that I leave here with regret. For in comparison with the troubles of this world, mine has been a golden sunshine. And now all is done. Oh, now I's gonna sing a song. If you will listen, I won't be long. 'Tis about that bright and happy land where all good darkies will be found. Then, my brethren, won't you meet me? Oh, yes, we will meet you. And won't we have a happy time when we meet in the sweet by and by? Keep us shouting, then, my brethren, won't you meet me? Oh, yes, we will meet you. And won't we have a happy time when we meet in the sweet by and by?
For more information on spirituals and minstrelsy, see Spirituals and the Birth of a Black Entertainment Industry by Sandra Jean Graham, published by University of Illinois Press. And for more songs by Sam Lucas, search for Songs of Sam Lucas by Sandra Graham in your web browser.